22. The Holy Fountain. The pilgrims were human beings, otherwise they would have acted differently. They had come a long and difficult journey, and now when the journey was nearly finished, and they had learned that the main thing that they had come for had ceased to exist, they didn't do as horses or cats or angleworms probably would have done, turn back and get at something profitable. No, anxious as they had before been able to see the miraculous fountain, they were as much as 40 times as anxious now to see the place where it used to be. There's no accounting for human beings. We made good time, and a couple of hours before sunset we stood up at the high confines of the Valley of Holiness, and our eyes swept it from end to end and noted its features. That is, its large features. These were three masses of buildings. They were distant and isolated temporality, shrunk into toy constructions in the lonely waste of what seemed a desert, and was. Such a scene is always mournful. It is so impressively still, and it looks so steeped in death. But there was a sound here which interrupted the stillness only to add its mournfulness. This was the faint, far sound of tolling bells which floated fitfully to us on the passing breeze, and so faintly, so softly, that we hardly knew whether we heard it with our ears or with our spirits. We reached the monastery before dark, and there the males were given lodging, but the women were sent over to the nunnery. The bells were close at hand now, and their solemn booming smote upon the ear like a message of doom. A superstitious despair possessed the heart of every monk and published itself in his ghastly face. Everywhere these black-robed, soft-sandaled, tallow-visaged spectres appeared, flitted about and disappeared, noiseless as the creatures of a troubled dream, and as uncanny. The old abbot's joy to see me was pathetic, even to tears, but he did the shedding himself. He said, "Delay not, son, but get to thy saving work, and we bring not the water back again, and soon we are ruined, and the good work of 200 years must end. And see to it thou do it with enchantments that be holy, for the church will not endure that work, and her cause be done by the devil's magic. When I work, Father, be sure that there will be no devil's work connected with it. I shall use no arts that come of the devil, and no elements not created by the hand of God. But is Merlin working strictly on pious lines?" "Ah, he said he would, my son, he said he would, and took an oath to make his promise good." "Well, in that case, let him proceed." "But surely you will not sit idly by, then, but help?" "I will not answer to mixed methods, Father, neither would it be professional courtesy. Two of a trade must not underbid each other. We might as well cut rates and be done with it. It would arrive at that in the end. Merlin has the contract, no other magician can touch it till he throws it up. But I will take it from him. It is a terrible emergency, and the act is thereby justified. And if it were not so, who will give the law to the church? The church giveth the law to all, and what she wills to do, that she may do, hurt whom it will. I will take it from him. You shall begin upon the moment. It may not be, Father, no doubt, as you say, where the power is supreme. No one can do as one likes and suffer no injury. But we poor magicians are not so situated. Merlin is a very good magician in a small way, and has quite a neat provincial reputation. He is struggling along, doing the best he can, and it would not be etiquette for me to take his job until he himself abandons it." The abbot's face lightened. "Ah, that is simple. There are ways to persuade him to abandon it." No, Father, it is skills not, as these people say. If he were persuaded against his will, he would load that well with malicious enchantment, which would balk me until I found out its secret. It might take a month. I could set up a little enchantment of mine, which I call the telephone, and he could not find out its secret in 100 years. Yes, you perceive, he might block me for a month. Would you like me to risk a month in dry time like this? A month? The mere thought of it maketh me to shudder. Have it thy way, my son, but my heart is heavy with this disappointment. Leave me, and let me wear my spirit with weariness and waiting, even as I have done these 10 long days, counterfeiting thus the thing that is called rest, the prone body making outward sign of repose, where inwardly is none. Of course, it would have been best all around for Merlin to waive etiquette and quit and call it half a day, since he would never be able to start the water, for he was a true magician of the time, which is to say, the big miracles, the ones that gave him his reputation, always had the luck to be performed when nobody but Merlin was present. He could not start this well with all this crowd around to see. A crowd was as bad for a magician's miracle in that day as it was for a spiritualist's miracle in mine. There was sure to be some skeptic on hand to turn up the gas at the crucial moment and spoil everything. But I did not want Merlin to retire from the job until I was ready to take a hold of it effectively myself, and I could not do that until I got my things from Camelot, and that would take 2 or 3 days. My presence gave the monks hope and cheered them up a good deal, insomuch as they ate a square meal that night for the first time in 10 days. As soon as their stomachs had been properly reinforced with food, their spirits began to rise fast. When the mead began to go round, they rose faster. By the time everybody was half seas over, the holy community was in good shape to make a night of it. So we stayed by the board and put it through on that line. Matters got to be very jolly. Good old questionable stories were told that make the tears run down the cavernous mouth stand wide and the round bellies shake with laughter, and questionable songs were bellowed out in a mighty chorus that drowned the boom of the tolling bells. At last I ventured a story myself, and vast was the success of it. Not right off, of course, for the native of those islands does not, as a rule, dissolve upon the early applications of a humorous thing. But the 5th time I told it, they began to crack in places. The 8th time I told it, they began to crumble. And at the 12th repetition, they fell apart in chunks, and at the 15th, they disintegrated, and I got a broom and swept them up. This language is figurative. Those islanders, well, they are slow pay at first in the matter of return for your investment of effort, but in the end they shall make the pay of all the other nations poorer and small by contrast. I was at the well the next day betimes. Merlin was there enchanting away like a beaver, but not raising the moisture. He was not in a pleasant humor, and every time I hinted that perhaps this contract was a shade too hefty for a novice, he unlimbered his tongue and cursed like a bishop. French bishop of the Regency days, I mean. Matters were about as I expected to find them. The fountain was an ordinary well. It had been dug in the ordinary way and stoned up in the ordinary way. There was no miracle about it. Even the lie that had created its reputation was not miraculous. I could have told it myself with one hand tied behind me. The well was in a dark chamber which stood in the center of a cut stone chapel whose walls were hung with pious pictures of workmanship that would have made a chromo feel good. Pictures historically commemorative of curative miracles which had been achieved by the waters when nobody was looking. That is, nobody but angels. They are always on deck when there is a miracle to the fore, so as to get put into the picture, perhaps. Angels are as fond of that which is a fire company. Look at the old masters. The well chamber was dimly lighted by lamps. The water was drawn with a windlass and a chain by monks, and poured into troughs which delivered it into stone reservoirs outside the chapel. When there was water to draw, I mean, but none but the monks could enter the well chamber. I entered it, for I had temporary authority to do so by courtesy of my professional brother and subordinate, but he hadn't entered it himself. He did everything by incantations. He never worked his intellect. If he had stepped in there and used his eyes instead of his disordered mind, he could have cured the well by natural means, and then turned it into a miracle in the customary way. But no, he was an old numbskull, a magician who believed in his own magic, and magician can thrive who is handicapped with a superstition like that. I had an idea that the well had sprung a leak, that some of the wall stones near the bottom had fallen and exposed fissures that allowed the water to escape. I measured the chain, 98 feet. Then I called in a couple of monks, locked the door, took a candle, and made them lower me in the bucket. When the chain was all played out, the candle confirmed my suspicion. A considerable section of the wall was gone, exposing a good big fissure. I almost regretted that my theory about the well's trouble was correct, because I had another one that had a showy point or two about the miracle. I remembered that in America, many centuries later, when an oil well ceased to flow, they used to blast it out with dynamite torpedo. If I should find this dry well and no explanation of it, I could astonish these people most nobly by having a person of no special value drop a dynamite bomb in it. It was my idea to appoint Merlin. However, it was plain that there was no occasion for the bomb. One cannot have everything the way he would like. Man has no business to be depressed by a disappointment, anyway. He ought to make up his mind to get even. That is what I did. I said to myself, I'm in no hurry. I can wait. The bomb will come good yet. And it did, too. When I was above ground again, I turned out the monks and let them down a fish line. The well was 150 feet deep, and there was 41 feet of water in it. I called to a monk and asked, "How deep is the well?" "That, sir, I wit not, having never been told." "How does the water usually stand in it?" "Near to the top these 2 centuries, as the testimony goeth, brought down to us by our predecessors." It was true, as to recent times at least, for there was witness to it, and better witness than a monk. Only about 20 or 30 feet of chain showed wear and use. The rest of it was unworn and rusty. What had happened when the well gave out that other time? Without a doubt, some practical person had come along and mended the leak, and then had come up and told the abbot he had discovered by divination that if the sinful bath were destroyed, the well would flow again. The leak had befallen again now, and these children would have prayed and processioned and tolled their bells for heavenly succor, till they all dried up and blew away, and no innocent of them would ever have thought to drop a fish line into the well, or go down in it and find out what was really the matter. Old habit of mind is one of the toughest things to get away from in the world. It transmits itself like a physical form and feature, and for a man in those days to have an idea that his ancestors hadn't had would have brought him up under the suspicion of being illegitimate. I said to the monk, "It is a difficult miracle to restore water in a dry well, but if we try, if my brother Merlin fails. Brother Merlin is a very passable artist, but only in the parlor magic line, and he may not succeed. In fact, it is not likely to succeed. But that should be nothing to his discredit. The man that can do this kind of miracle knows enough to keep hotel." "Hotel? I've not heard of hotel. It's what you call hostel. That a man can do this miracle, can keep hostel. I can do this miracle. I shall do this miracle. Yet I do not try to conceal from you that it is a miracle to tax the occult powers to the last strain. None knoweth that the truth better than the brotherhood, indeed, for is the record of aforetime that it was parlous difficult and took a year. Natheless, God send you good success, and to that end we will pray. As a matter of business, it was a good idea to get the notion around that the thing was difficult. Many a small thing has been made large by the right kind of advertising. That monk was filled up with the difficulty of this enterprise. He would fill up the others. In 2 days, the solicitude would be booming. On my way home at noon, I met Sandy. She had been sampling the hermits. I said, "I would like to do that myself. This is Wednesday. Is there a matinee? A matinee?" "A which, please you, sir?" "Matinee. Do they keep open afternoons?" "Who?" "The hermits, of course." "Keep open?" "Yes, keep open. Is that plain enough? Do they knock off at noon?" "Knock off?" "Knock off, yes, knock off." "What is the matter with knock off? I've never seen such a dunderhead. Can you understand anything at all? In plain terms, do they shut up shop, draw the game, bank the fires?" "Shut up shop, draw, there, never mind, let it go. You make me tired. You can't seem to understand the simplest thing." "I would I might please thee, sir, and it is to me dole and sorrow that I fail, albeit sith I am but a simple damsel and taught of the nun, being of the cradle unbaptized in those deep waters of learning that do anoint with the sovereignty him that partaketh of the most noble sacrament, investing him with reverend state to the mental eye of the humble mortal who, by bar and lack of great consecration, seeth in his own unlearned estate but a symbol of that other sort of lack of loss of which men do publish the pitying eye with sackcloth trappings whereon the ashes of grief do lie bepowdered and bestrewn. And so, when such shall in the darkness of his mind encounter these golden phrases of high mystery, these shut up shops, and draw the game, and bank the fires, it is but by the grace of God that he bursts not for the envy of the mind that can beget, and the tongue that can deliver so great and mellow-sounding miracles of speech, and so if do ensue confusion in that humble mind, and further to divine the meanings of these wonders, then if so be this misconception not vain but sooth and true, wit ye will that the very substance of worshipfulness dear homage and may not lightly be misprized, nor has been, and yet ye noted this complexion of mood and mind, and understood that I would not and could not, might not, nor yet might or could, nor might not, nor could not, might be the advantage turned to the desired would, and so I pray you mercy of my fault, and that ye will of your kindness and your charity forgive it, good master and most dear Lord. I couldn't make it all out, that is, the details, but I got the general idea, and enough of it, too, to be ashamed. It was not fair to spring those 19th century technicalities upon the untutored infant of the 6th and then rail at her because she couldn't get their drift, when she was making the honest best drive at it she could, too, and no fault of hers that she couldn't fetch the home plate, and so I apologized. Then we meandered pleasantly away toward the hermit holes in sociable converse together, and better friends than ever. I was gradually coming to have a mysterious and shudderly reverence for this girl. Nowadays, whenever she pulled out from the station and got her train fairly started on one of those horizonless transcontinental sentences of hers, I was borne in upon me that I was standing in the awful presence of the mother of the German language. I was so impressed with this that sometimes when she began to empty one of these sentences on me, I unconsciously took the very attitude of reverence and stood uncovered. And if the words had been water, I had been drowned sure. She had exactly the German way. Whatever was in her mind to be delivered, whether it a mere remark or sermon or encyclopedia or the history of war, she would get into a single sentence or die. Whenever the literary German dives into a sentence, that is the last you are going to see of him till he emerges on the other side of his Atlantic with his verb in his mouth. We drifted from hermit to hermit all the afternoon. It was a most strange menagerie. The chief emulation among them seemed to be to see which could manage to be the uncleanest and most prosperous with vermin. Their manner and attitudes were the last expression of the complacent self-righteousness. It was one anchorite's pride to lie naked in the mud and let the insects bite him and blister him unmolested. It was another's to lean against the rock all day long, conspicuous to the admiration of the throng of pilgrims and pray. It was another's to go naked and crawl around on all fours. It was another's to drag about with him year in and year out 80 pounds of iron. It was another's to never lie down when he slept, but to stand among the thorn bushes and snore when there were pilgrims around to look. A woman who had the white hair of age and no other apparel, was black from crown to heel with 47 years of holy abstinence from water. Groups of gazing pilgrims stood around all and every of these strange objects, lost in reverent wonder, and envious of the feckless sanctity which the pious austerities had won from them and from exacting heaven. By and by we went to see one of the supremely great ones. He was a mighty celebrity. His fame had penetrated all Christendom. The noble and the renowned journeyed from the remotest lands on the globe to pay him reverence. His stand was in the center of the widest part of the valley, and it took all that space to hold his crowds. His stand was a pillar 60 feet high with a broad platform on the top of it. He was now doing what he had been doing every day for 20 years up there, bowing his body ceaselessly and rapidly almost to his feet. It was his way of praying. I timed him with a stopwatch, and he made 1,244 revolutions in 24 minutes and 46 seconds. It seemed a pity to have all this power going to waste. It was one of the most useful motions in mechanics, the pedal movement, and so I made a note in my memorandum book, purposing some day to apply a system of elastic cords to him and run a sewing machine with it. I afterward carried out that scheme and got 5 years good service out of him, in which time he turned out upward of 18,000 first-rate tow linen shirts, which was 10 a day. I worked him Sundays and all. He was going Sundays at the same as weekdays, and it was no use to waste the power. The shirts cost me nothing but the mere trifle for the materials. I furnished those myself. It would not have been right to make him do that. And they sold like smoke to pilgrims at $1.50 apiece, which was the price of 50 cows or a blooded racehorse in Arthurdom. They were regarded as perfect protection against sin and advertised as such by my knights everywhere, with the paint pot and the stencil plate, insomuch as there was not a cliff or a boulder or a dead wall in England where you couldn't read it on a mile distance. By the only genuine Saint Stylite patronized by nobility, patent applied for. There was more money in the business than one knew what to do with. As it extended, I brought out a line of goods suitable for kings and nobby thing for duchesses and that sort, with ruffles down the forehatch and running gear clewed up with feather stitch to a leeward and then hauled aft with a backstay and triced up with a half turn in the standing rigging of the forward weather gaskets. Yes, it was a daisy. But about that time I noticed that the motive power had taken to standing on one leg, and I found out that there was something the matter with the other one. So I stocked the business and unloaded, taking Sir Bors de Ganis into camp financially along with certain of his friends, for the work stopped within a year, and the good saint got him to his rest. But he had earned it, I can say that for him. When I saw him that first time, however, his personal condition will not quite bear description here. You can read it in the Lives of the Saints. All details concerning the hermits in this chapter are from Lecky, but greatly modified. This book is not being a history, but only a tale. The majority of the historian's frank details were too strong for reproduction in it. Editor.